is a manga-influenced role-playing game of the type that's prevalent on most consoles, but rather lacking on the Wii. A market opening which probably explains Atlas Publishing's decision to update the game for Nintendo's flagship console. Make no mistake, you can tell in an instant that Baroque is a game first issued way back in 1998 for the Sega Saturn. Being asked to shell out good money for a game that's been around for a decade probably explains why Baroque has received such bad press. To be fair to the game, it actually doesn't deserve the critical happy slapping it's taken. Its graphics are hideously dated and made up from repeating blocks of textureless modular scenery, but the game itself has some interesting ideas. You play an amnesiac character in a devastated post-apocalyptic world run by a cult that no longer believes that God saves. Instead, they believe that it's the faithful's job to save God, and by faithful, they mean you. Consequently, you're dispatched to the giant Neuro Tower and begin your downward quest to find God in his dungeon and give him some much-needed psychiatric help. Baroque's major conceit is that the inside of the Neuro Tower constantly shifts and recreates itself. Its most controversial conceit is that after each death, your character returns to the very start of the game and loses all the equipment he's collected so far, ready to start over from scratch. It's almost as if the developers wanted to come up with the single most infuriating combination of gameplay and mechanics imaginable. Yet strangely, it's not all that bad. Each death feeds you some plot-related flashback material as a compensation, and the plot itself, which revolves around mass delusions and a disaster known as the Blaze, is intriguing. The spooky characters with names like Longneck and the Bagged One hint at the fevered imagination at work behind the game, and it's impossible not to keep having just one more go in an attempt to find out what's actually going on. On a less positive note, the combat methods would have seemed simplistic even when the game first came out on the Sega Saturn, and the constant grinding rock soundtrack is grating and seems out of place in a game that should be going for an otherworldly, ethereal feel. You'll also find that you need to constantly defeat enemies to maintain your health, which forces you to race with panicked haste through the early stages of Baroque. The result is that a game that should be about careful exploring and gathering in an ethereal dungeon occasionally feels a bit like a button-mashing arcade beat-em-up. Finally, the ever-changing dungeon idea, so appealing in theory, essentially results in characterless, purposeless mazes. All told, it's not the disaster of a game that it's been made out to be, but nor is it a particularly good game. It has a niche appeal, and players in that niche will find Baroque very, very rewarding. Everyone else would be advised to spend their money elsewhere.